Hi everyone, happy Victober. The video I will be doing today is on reading Victorian literature throughout the year. So this to me, if I had not read any of these or if I was planning on rereading all of them, would be my ideal reading calendar. Kind of thinking about what kind of mood I am in different seasons. And now I definitely do crave Victorian literature the most in the fall and in the winter time. But if I'm having a good reading year, which this year has not been as much of a Victorian literature year, and as sad as I am about that, I just decided to accept it and go with it. But it's maybe even more excited for Victober, because then I get to really anticipate just drowning in Victorian literature. And yes, without further ado, so in January, it is cold, it is dark, and a lot of people, I think of January as a bummer, but I kind of embrace January. That's the one month that I'm really excited about winter. In Pennsylvania, December does not feel that wintry, so January, I kind of go with it. I kind of just enjoy it and just want to cozy up with books. And I have picked 3 for that month. So they are all kind of the books, 3 of the books that ended up, or 2 of them are books that ended up on my otherworldly Victorian novels list video that I did last, I think it was November. And they are Sylvia's Lovers and Grania. These are both books that show a lot of characters kind of aimlessly, helplessly at the mercy of the landscape that they are nearby. Sylvia's Lovers is the location is based on Whitby, which is a shore town, and just the way that the town is totally at the mercy of the sea for their livelihoods and for the life of the people that work as sailors is really fascinating to see. And then in Grania, it's even more isolated. It's an island off the coast of Ireland, and something about these just scream winter to me. This kind of loneliness and this sort of haunted almost feel to them. Can't recommend them enough. And then if you want creepy Gothic, I definitely recommend The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is a very iconic Victorian novel, and I think with very good reason. It starts out when Walter Hartright is on the way to stay at an estate with a man whose 2 nieces are there, and he's going to be teaching them art. While he's on the way to this house, a woman in a white nightgown who looks very frantic. He interacts with her for a few minutes. She's not very coherent, and then she runs away and disappears, and he has no idea where she is. And a few minutes later, a carriage comes by, and there is a man in the carriage saying, "Have you seen a woman? We're looking for an escaped prisoner from an asylum." So a very interesting and intriguing beginning. There are so many layers to unravel and secrets to uncover, and I can't recommend it enough. Then we move on to February, when I start to get tired of winter. So I picked some lighthearted ones, and also one that included something about Valentine's Day. So the first one that I picked that's a very sweet romance for February is Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. This does have some really heartbreaking moments in the beginning when Agnes is a governess, and the family that she works for, the children treat her atrociously. You cannot imagine how terribly they treat her. But the romance that is in it is very sweet and makes it all worth it. It's just a very gentle Victorian novel. Very nice, just to kind of warm your heart. And then if you really want some lulls, 3 Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. This is a comic novel. It's hysterical. It's filled with so many mistakes of these 3 incompetent sailors traveling down the Thames River and all of the mistakes that they make. And it's just so funny. Then Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. And this is a really nice one because of Thomas Hardy's pastoral writing. And so you can kind of envision, things being green again, eventually in the springtime and the summer. There's also something to do with a Valentine in this one. So going with the Valentine's Day theme, it works for February. Then we have March, when you're really, really tired of winter. And to me, March never really feels like spring. You start to get more daylight. That's the way it feels like spring, but it's always pretty cold in March, at least where I live. But the funny one that I picked for that month is Diary of a Nobody. This is another comic novel, and it is just kind of the day-to-day observations that he has on what is happening in his life. There's some very funny situations. His observations on his son, it's just incredibly funny. And then it is March, so I have to recommend Middlemarch. I think a lot of people, maybe who don't read a lot of Victorian literature, if you find your motivation lacking, I think starting earlier in the year with a big, chunky, ambitious Victorian novel rather than later in the year is a good idea. And I think there have been, in my time on BookTube, there have been several Read Middlemarch in March read-alongs, and I think it's a really fun notion. And it's just an incredibly worthwhile novel, incredibly worth your time. I love it so much. Then we move on to April. So spring is starting to come, Easter time. Easter's one of my favorite holidays. I just love the brightness and the vibrancy of the green that you're seeing outside in April. And I have to recommend Daniel Deronda by George Eliot, mainly because I guess I'm nostalgic in the springtime for Daniel Deronda, perhaps. I don't know, but something about it just seems suited to the springtime. And it's a great novel, I'd say, to read outdoors. Then if you want something with a bit of a gripping mystery, I recommend The Fisherman's Lady by George MacDonald. This is a neat novel about this little Welsh town, and there is some sort of mystery that slowly becomes uncovered. There's also a clear love of books in this. I love that our main character, when he happens upon the woman who will be his romantic interest, she is reading the Fairy Queen on the beach. So someone is really a book lover if they're reading the Fairy Queen on the beach. And I enjoyed it. I read it last August. And then something really kind of, easy breezy read is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is a series of little vignettes about the small town of Cranford, small town gossips, and all of the funny scenarios that they get into. Then we move into May, and I have a group of 3 novels that I kind of, I don't know what I want to say. I group these together because to me they're so strong in character development, and you really get up close and personal with these characters, and they are Wives and Daughters, Deerbrook, and The Heir of Redclyffe. So these are very intrapersonal novels, that's what I'll say. And also kind of the sociology of these novels, seeing how the characters relate to one another, how the decisions that they make have ripple effects for their community that they are living in, is really fascinating. Wives and Daughters is about Molly, who her father remarries, and she gains a stepsister and a mother, and how that affects her little family. And then Deerbrook is about the 2 Ibbotson sisters, Margaret and Hester, and they come to visit Deerbrook after they are orphaned. And it's a very small insular town, and all the repercussions that happen because of that. And then The Heir of Redclyffe, which is about one main family, but then there's also their cousin Guy. And Guy has sort of this tragic family legacy on his back. And so it's how that affects him, how he views himself in relation to the other characters. And it's fascinating. And then in the month of June, Lorna Doone. Lorna Doone is a great adventure tale. Whenever I think about Lorna Doone, I always want to reread it, but it is a bit longer, so I haven't made time for it yet. But I love it because it's an Exmoor book, so a lot of it is set in the forest, and I just think there's something that has a great charm to it. But I think adventure stories are very much suited for the summertime. There are definitely some slow moments to it, but there are some really big, exciting moments. And then Adam Bede by George Eliot. I'm gonna keep recommending pretty much every George Eliot novel that I love on this list. Adam Bede, I would say, because it is more lighthearted out of George Eliot's books. I say lighthearted, maybe more readable. There are some really serious topics that happen in this. It's not for the faint of heart, but she does do it fairly gently I didn't feel my heart totally ripped out by the end, as opposed to cough, cough, Thomas Hardy. And then also I want to recommend Dr. Thorne by Anthony Trollope. This is a really sweet, it has a sweet romance in it. Not to say it's just this fluff cotton candy of a book. I think sometimes on BookTube, we make this false dichotomy that either books are really tragic, so they have tons of meaning, or they're light and fluffy, so they're vapid. And that's a false dichotomy. Books can be both. So there's lots that Trollope has to say on class, on gender, on religion, on politics, all of that. It's one of the Barchester Chronicles, and it's wonderful. Then we move into July, and I think July is a month for thrillers, and I say that the Victorian sensation novel was the thriller of their day, and Lady Audley's Secret is an incredibly readable, pacey book. I remember out of the 37 chapters in the book, there was one chapter that I struggled with, that I felt like it lagged. And that's saying a lot for a Victorian novel. I love them and I'm willing to put in the time, but there are some that I really struggle with as I read. But I love them for that, because then I remember them more. But Lady Audley's Secret, it is juicy. I mean, the title alone, what is her secret? You want to know. And it has got some, cliffhanger type chapter endings, and you have to keep reading. I was utterly compelled to keep reading. And then because I read it in July, now I am nostalgic for it then, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I know it's weird for me to include it in the list then, but for some reason I just decided to read it last July, and I loved reading it then. And there was one day where I was driving and listening to it, and it was rainy the whole drive, and it was just so suited to such a sinister novel. So I definitely recommend Dracula for July. Then August, I want to recommend The Law and the Lady. And I recommend The Law and the Lady by Wilkie Collins because it is another sensation novel that is incredibly readable. I read it in 3 days, and I wished I could have read it more quickly. That's how compelled I was to pick this up. It starts out with Valeria, is it Woodville, I think is her name, and she is a newlywed. She knows her husband has some secret in his past, but he will not tell her. And so she goes on a mission to find out what it is. And once she finds out what it is, she wants to kind of unravel all of the different little loose ends from this secret. And she will not stop until she has everything resolved. And I think that maybe it would make a good vacation read. So a lot of us, maybe not in 2020, but a lot of us maybe go for somewhere on holiday, as you call it in the UK, or on vacation, as we call it in the US, in August. And I think it would make a great vacation read. Then we move into September, when things are starting to cool off a bit. The days are getting a bit shorter, and I want to recommend The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I loved this book. I was feeling very intimidated by Oscar Wilde, and I can't tell you why. I think I had just built up in my mind that he was going to be an intimidating author. This is a really chilling, haunting kind of story with lots, it's heavy on, symbolism and commentary on society of the day. And the ideas, though, the message that he's putting across is very transcendent. And I think September would be a good time to read it. And then we come to October, aka Victober, and two, to me, of the most iconic Gothic type Victorian novels. First is The Moonstone, and I think that the mystery novel really started to take off during the Victorian era. And what is more classic than a missing gem that was stolen from India? And you get multiple narrators in this that really move it along. And also there is a fabulous miniseries adaptation that is on Amazon Prime, if you have that. And then A Welsh Witch by Alan Raine. I love this book. It's, I think, a hidden gem. And it's about Catrin, and she lives on this, little insular town in Wales. And she's very misunderstood. And she's the misanthrope of the town. There's all of these rumors and gossip about her, and then someone new arrives in the town, and it sets off this whole train of events. And it's fascinating, and the writing is beautiful, and one of the scenes that is such a spoiler, so I can't say it, just still moves me today, and I'm 3 years out from reading it. next we get to November. And November things have definitely chilled down. And I think The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy, something about reading his pastoral novels, I think when it's not green out, when it might be kind of drab out, is really appealing, make you feel kind of a bit more close to nature when you want to be. And The Return of the Native is my favorite of Thomas Hardy's books. I love it so much, and I can't recommend it enough. And yes, it's just a glorious one. And then such a famous Victorian one. I want to recommend both the Bronte sisters. I want to recommend Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte and Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. These are my two favorite Bronte novels. Maybe things will change after this Victober. I don't know, but I love these, and I love them for very different reasons. Wuthering Heights, I'm kind of sure is a you love it or you hate it kind of book, and I can't guarantee you're going to like it. I can't, but I know that I love it, and I think it is a really good examination, almost on kind of inherited sin or inherited, patterns of unhealthy behavior, and how it affects future generations when it's not dealt with. And Jane Eyre has all of the atmosphere. There are so many books that harken back to Jane Eyre. It is so talked about, I know, but I think for very good reasons. For very good reason. It's also written in first person, which I think is really makes it extra approachable. And lastly, December. So I have a slew of Dickens books to recommend to you. And first is A Christmas Carol. I crave A Christmas Carol every single year. And I'm always surprised every single year that I crave it yet again. But it is such a classic story. It does not take long to read. And it's just absolutely wonderful. And then I think that Dickens has a lot of charm in the next novel, and that's why I recommend it. I think you want some charm at Christmas, and that is The Pickwick Papers. And I also recommend it because it's very easy to break up. It's very clear, like chapter cuttings. Here's this little adventure, and then they rest. And here's this little adventure. You're seeing this group of friends gallivanting about the countryside. There's so many amusing moments. There's a couple Christmas scenes, and just if you like Dickens humor, you would really enjoy The Pickwick Papers. It's delightful, and it's definitely what I'm going to reread once I've made it through the first, once I have read all of his books. When I loop back around, it's definitely one that I'll be rereading. And then David Copperfield. This just has such, I was so smitten with this book, and I can't tell you, there's just a lot of side characters that are fabulous in this. Peggotty and Betsy Trotwood and Mr. Micawber. There's so many good things going about this book. It is kind of the stereotypical like Dickens orphan, but if you like that thing, and I think that David seems a lot less angelic than Oliver Twist, although I love Oliver from Oliver Twist also. I think maybe he seems a bit more earthy than Oliver, if that was maybe a complaint that you had. So I really do recommend it. And then I want to recommend The Christmas Hirelings by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. I don't know why, but I neglected to talk about this book last Victober. So, I would have read it right after 2 Victobers ago in December. And then by the time the next October rolled around, I forgot to talk about it. So I'm talking about it now. It's a very charming story. The audiobook was only about 3 hours, and I wish more people knew about it. It's about this group of orphans who they go to stay with this old curmudgeon at Christmas time, and he's not on good terms with family. He's going to be all alone, and they melt his heart, and there's lots of humor in it. There's some really sweet things. It just screams to be made into a movie. And yes, a really short, easy Christmas read. Definitely recommend it. I hope you enjoyed my Victorian novels throughout the year video. Let me know if you thought there were some that I missed, or if you would definitely change the month that I suggested that you read one. I will be back for another video soon, and have a lovely day. Bye.